In this video, I'm making ruined timber frame buildings entirely out of XPS foam. This is one of my favorite types of terrain pieces to both build and use within my RPGs and tabletop wargames. The ruins I'm making in this video are based on my two-story buildings from the medieval city I've been creating. The idea is to have a before and after of the same building. The entire building is going to be constructed out of XPS foam and cut down on my hot wire table. I do my best to make all my cuts in the beginning of the build process to save time. Here I'm cutting out all the strips of foam which will be used for a variety of materials. Some of the strips get cut down further into bricks which will be used as the foundation of the ruins. Including some half-thick bricks is going to add a lot of variety to the brick wall and make it look more interesting. The edges on all the bricks are a bit too sharp, so I toss them all into a container of rocks and give them a good shake in order to make them look more like textured stone. The stones are glued one by one. Each brick is placed over the joint of the two bricks below in order to create a strong structure. I'm also keeping composition in mind when placing the half-thick bricks and creating the destroyed sections of the walls. It was at this point that I realized I had quite a few extra bricks, so I decided to make two ruined buildings. The second ruin is going to be based off of the same two-story building, but be even more destroyed. I get started on the floor by measuring and cutting out some large timbers. I'm going to be adding texture to all the wood sections of this build with a handheld hot wire cutter. The straight attachment creates a really nice stylized wood grain. Rolled up tinfoil is also used to add some additional weathering to these pieces. The base of the floor is created with smaller beams, which are teared to look destroyed. Flat planks are then glued on top to create the rest of the floor. Having multiple points of contact between the planks and the larger timbers will create a very durable structure. The floors are then glued onto the stone foundations. Next up are the walls of the ruins. I'm cutting out a bunch of thinner pieces out of XPS foam. I'll be using templates I created ahead of time in order to speed up the crafting process. This will help with the position of the windows and ensure consistency across the building. Rolled up tinfoil is used to give the walls a plaster look. One of the many advantages of using XPS foam is its ability to hold texture. I start texturing the smaller wood beams that will be used to frame these wall pieces. This is what's going to give the structure its iconic timber frame look. Since the inside of this ruin is visible, I'm making sure to frame the other side of the wall as well. I'm marking out where I want the wall to be destroyed. I find that creating the full wall first and then cutting it down creates a more convincing ruin. I recycle the other piece of the wall and use it for another section of the build. I'm tearing the XPS foam on all the exposed edges to make the walls look destroyed. Similar to the floor of the building, the roof is also getting a timber frame trim. Next up, I get started on the gables by cutting down some more foam. I'm using the templates that I created earlier to make sure my dimensions are accurate. I'm cutting out quite a few of these triangles because these pieces will also be converted into the rafters as well. Since all the roof components are based off of the same piece, it guarantees a flush roof. After all the pieces are cut out, I begin to glue everything down. I had to get creative with certain sections where the rafters are above a destroyed wall. I used some extra walls to temporarily prop them up until the glue dried. Once dried, I began cutting and tearing the edges of all the pieces I want to look destroyed. I go slow with this step since it's easier to remove material, but impossible to put it back. Larger planks are then cut out. These are going to be placed on the top of the rafters. The planks are destroyed in a way that reveals the rafters underneath. This creates a lot of interesting detail to the build. Next, I get started on the shingles, which are created from one large chunk of textured foam. The chunk is then cut down into strips, and then cut down one more time into individual pieces. I'm keeping in mind composition when placing the shingles, making sure the destroyed areas are still visible. time to get some paint on these ruins. I'm using my airbrush to prime the building since there's a bunch of small spaces that make it a bit hard for a brush to cover. I'm using a couple of grays and mixing them to create all my stone colors. Using different colors will give the stone wall a bunch of interesting variation. The paint is applied with an overbrushing technique, which maintains the black color in all the deepest recesses of the stonework. I begin painting the upper portion of the building, starting with the plaster walls. I'm not too worried about staying within the lines here, since I can clean up this layer when painting the next color. While constructing these ruins, I was mindful of how I'd be able to paint the interiors, making sure the openings were large enough for me to accommodate a paintbrush. I work up a gradient of browns for all the wood sections, focusing the lighter of the browns towards the edges. The shingles are painted teal to match the rest of the medieval city. The colorful roofs give these buildings a fun high fantasy look. The teal is also built up in a gradient, including an edge highlight on each shingle to make them pop. Next, I'm going to shave down some pastel to make my own pigment. This is going to be used to add some shading to all the areas where the wood meets the plaster. This creates some real nice dimension to the paint job. PVA glue and flock are mixed together to create some moss. The paste is then applied throughout the ruin. This helps add some additional texture to the build. These ruins are now considered done. I'm really happy with how these turned out. The destroyed sections add a bunch of interesting detail and also help reveal all the work that was put into the underlying framework. And that wraps up this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for future hobby content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.